So Chris wrote Irish. So tell us, how did you get involved in the Palestinian cause?
I came from a political family, so I've always been, I suppose, politically aware, and I'm not actually sure how I got involved in the Palestinian issue, and I do remember that I must have been only 18 or 19, and I wrote a letter to the Irish Times highlighting the treatment of Palestinians by Israel, and so that's about 40 years ago, and it was printed, and I suppose then I just became more and more involved. Obviously I spent about 10 years in England, so I wasn't involved in politics as much then, but before that, and then when I got back, obviously I was involved in, and I was always following what was happening and for anybody watching, especially an Irish person, when you see the way Palestinians are treated, how they're treated like animals in many cases, and people will say that is extreme, but when you see the way they just executed two Palestinians who had surrendered, and the daily treatment of Palestinians is horrific, and I suppose as Irish people we know better than anyone, and that's why we have empathy, because we are a country also that has faced colonialism and partition, and we have a big neighbour who is imposing terror on us, and so I suppose when you look at Palestine, when you look at what's happening there and you see what's happened here, there isn't very much difference, because it's about power and money and influence, and the English, like Richard said earlier on, the English have taught and Israel how to impose terror on nations and Palestine. So I've just been active, and I suppose I feel comfortable on that particular issue, and I just got involved in protests and marches and activism, and then in 2008 Angus Snuddig asked if I'd go on a flotilla, and that was the last boat that ever actually got through to Gaza. We got through to Gaza, and we spent 2 or 3 days there, and we visited Palestinian communities, the hospitals, and the conditions we saw there were just, even this was in 2008, and it was pretty horrific. They were using equipment in the hospitals that was second-hand equipment, and they had to, it was like you had walls around it. You couldn't go any further. At that time, you couldn't go any further than 3 kilometres out to fish. So the fishermen had to just go up and down the coast. And then, of course, you have the F-16 fighters flying over. So I suppose, when you see that, the reality of occupation, and, it changes people. And I suppose it changed me.
And when you were there in 2008, where did you stay?
We stayed in Gaza City, in accommodation there. Just local people put us up, as they do, and like the people in Palestine, Palestinians are so generous, like beyond, they'd give you their last bite, and honestly, that's so true, so we stayed with families there, and like I said, we were only 2 days there, 2 nights there, and it was busy, and then we came out and we brought, there was children who had serious surgery, so we were bringing them out. One of them was an amputee and required urgent surgery, so we brought them out back on the boat that we went out on, and I suppose that was the first flotilla boat. There was a couple of boats at that stage, and like I said, we were the last one. Subsequently, any boats going through couldn't get through. So it was. So I suppose it's a gradual process. It's an increasing awareness, and that's how I got involved in an active.
And what was the morale Yeah, that was 2008.
That was 2008, yeah.
And that's before that.
Mavi Mara, yeah. So in 2010, there was another flotilla, and again, Angus and myself we went to Cueva Butterley, organised it, and we went to Cyprus, but the Cypriots wouldn't let us off join the flotilla, so we were stuck on land. We were trying to get out, and anyway, we spent a day or two trying to get off to join the flotilla, but we couldn't, and that was the Mavi Mara flotilla, where the Israelis killed participants on the Mavi Mara, mostly Turkish participants, and that was, so it was, you know, some would say we were lucky not to get off, but we did our best. We just couldn't. And then in 2011, we were with, actually it was John Mallon and Phil McCullough. We were down in Turkey trying to get on a boat, and it was, we were leaving from Turkey, but the Israelis sabotaged the boat because they cut through the shaft for the propeller. They cut through it 3/4 of the way through, so that I think they were hoping that we wouldn't notice, and they would, we'd be out to sea when it would break. But we noticed when we were filling up fuel, we noticed that it was going to be that there was some rat noise that shouldn't be there. So we investigated, and we could see that it was clearly sawed through. So the boat was sabotaged during that night. So we had to up sticks and go back home. And then we came back out later that year, and we went on the MV Saoirse. And that was actually, Saoirse made my daughter there. That's it. We named her after that boat. So she's named after a boat. So we were on that boat, and there was 14 of us there, and you know, it was a real. That was an experience as well, and we were kidnapped from sea at that stage as well. That process took like about. We were started and finished within 2 weeks. We were jailed for a week, so it was a different, completely different experience from this experience, the most recent one.
So take us up to that last global flotilla. There were 50 boats involved.
Yeah, so the Global Flotilla, Freedom Flotilla, was 3 organisations joined together, and it was all volunteers doing it. So some boats left from Barcelona, some left from Tunis, and I left from Tunis because I was taught it'd be quicker. I'd save myself a week, and I thought it'd be closer. But as it happens, we were in Tunis 2 weeks before we even got on the boat. So because it was volunteers, and I don't think there was as much probably nautical experience as there might have been. Some of the boats that were bought weren't really seaworthy. Like the boat we were on was 40 years old. It was supposed to have 2 engines. It had 1 engine, and the toilets broke after a week, which made it disgusting, and it was unpleasant. But the boat was made for 8 people, and there was 22 of us on it, so it was quite an intimate experience when you were trying to find somewhere to sleep at night. You literally just had to throw yourself down, because obviously we were conscious that there was drones following us the entire length of from when we left. So in fact, one of the boats was hit by a drone in Tunis. So obviously you're on high alert. So we had watches, so you had to keep watch at night to make sure, you know, that you're not going to be hit by more drones, and be alert to that. And but so we were going along. So we left on the 14th of September after 2 weeks. And like I say, a lot of the boats that were due to go, I think we were hoping to have like about 55, 60 boats. But when the night when we were all intercepted happened, there was only 41 boats. So it was, you know, there's a lot of boats that didn't make it. Some sank. Such was their poor seaworthiness. So that was. you're just hoping nothing happened to us. The boat I was on was the Spectre, and it was a nice motorboat. I saw some of the boats, and they were just like fishing boats or sailing boats, and like there's nowhere to go up on deck. You're underneath, unless you were going up to do something with it. And I've never been on, like, I'm not. The last time on the other flotillas, I just spent most of the time just getting sick overboard. But this time I managed to get medicated ear patches, so it stopped you getting sick. So I didn't get sick at all, which was a first for me. But you still feel a bit queasy. But it was So the boat, the Spectre, it was like I say, it was a decent boat compared to some of them, and we had 2 generators on the boat, and but because you were constantly watching for drones, and we reached. So the first stop, we went from Tunis to Sicily, and then we went from Sicily to Crete, and just around Crete we were hit one night with 4 drones hit us, and some of the other boats were hit as well, and our boat was hit, and that was like, honestly, that was terrifying. I suppose the drones are like, it's like a blast bomb. When it hits you, it hits the boat. It was terrifying. And all you're thinking, you have your life jacket on, because the person who was on shift on the night watch shouted, "Get down, get down." So you throw on your life jacket, and then you're waiting. And as it happened, the drone, the blast bombs didn't do any damage, serious damage to the boat. But if they had a hit, we had 2 generators up on top, and if they had a hit the fuel, the fuel containers beside it, it could have been a different story. So when the drones are hitting like that, you're just thinking, make sure if you have to jump off the boat, if you get a chance to jump off the boat as far as you can, so you don't get sucked back under. And it's mad what your head you'd be thinking, and you just don't want to get sucked back under your own boat. So, but we did know that because of the activism in Italy and Spain, that the Spanish had sent a boat out to follow the flotilla. So you did think you'd had a decent chance to survive if you had to jump in. So all these things are going through your head, and it's.
And what did the Irish government do because obviously all of us that were here, and this was big news. The flotilla was in the news every day, and everything else was the same internationally. So what did the Irish government do during that period?
Well, I felt, I suppose I felt let down by the Irish government, because they could have done a lot more. They were aware of what was happening. The Spanish government sent a boat out, the Italian government sent a boat out, and then we requested that the Irish government would put an observer even on the boats. Either the Italian or the Spanish boat. They could have put observers on there, and they didn't do that. So it was disappointing, but I suppose it's no surprise from the government, who have even resisted the Occupied Territories Bill. So it's not a huge surprise, but it was disappointing that they didn't do more around that. And Simon Harris rang me the night before, or 2 nights beforehand, to explain, and I said, look, why isn't more happening? And he was saying, while he supported, it's all words and there's no action. And that's for me, that's the difficulty with this government, that they don't act, they don't hold people to account. They allow, there's no consequences for Israel, and they're not willing to rock the boat, literally. And so, again, it was disappointing that the Irish government didn't do more, that they didn't send out observers or fast-track the Occupied Territories Bill, or John Brady introduced legislation, the Illegal Israeli Settlement Divestment Bill. And, there's so much that could be done. The flights in Shannon, there's so much that could be done. And the genocide bonds, but they don't do any of it. They pay lip service, they say how horrible it is, how horrific it is, and they make a nice TikTok or whatever, but that's where it ends.
Okay. Describe to us when the Israeli troops seized the boat.
Yeah. So that, I suppose that's, again, that's a really tense. After we were hit by the drones, apparently the Turks sent out defensive drones that would protect us from further attacks, drone attacks. So that gave us a level of comfort, although you're still really worried and on high alert. But nothing happened until the night before we intercepted one of the boats. A warship came close to one of the boats, and a submarine, for whatever reason, probably they were gathering intelligence for when they did do the interception. So they came really close to one boat, and that one boat, all the participants on that threw over their phones. So them in the boats, they left. The participants on that boat were going mad, so they had no phones in for a night. So, so then you knew it was getting close. We were about 100 nautical miles out. You knew it's getting close, and it's getting tense. And so then the night, and you know it's going to be at night when it's dark, and it's disconcerting, and it's dry. It wasn't overly cold, and they send a mothership in, and they put these two, they send these big ribs in, like military ribs, and they have Israeli IOF soldiers on the boat, and they're all balaclavaed up, and all you see is the eyes, and they have all obviously the assault equipment and the guns, and so they just shine a beam on you and tell you, everybody get to the front of the boat. So we all went, put your life jackets on, and you go to the front of the boat, and you're sitting there. So you're sitting there, and they come on board. Then they obviously do whatever searches and check out the boat, and then they tell you to come down, and everything is at gunpoint. It's really high tension point, but when they were coming on, we all threw our phones over, and I took Imodium because I didn't want to shit myself. And I didn't want to ask to go to the toilet either. So it worked amazingly. I still haven't gone to the toilet since. So you can say Imodium or quality product. But yeah, so, and then I put a tracker in my sock, and and I'll tell you about that. But so they come on board, and we were up the front, then they move us down the back. So it took them about 12 to 15 hours, because it was about 7, 8, 9 o'clock, I think, when they came on board, and it was like about 10 or 11 when we got to the port of Ashdod, and that was.
Had they control of the boat then?
Oh yeah, they take over the boat, and they had to ask our captain a couple of things about the boat, and obviously it was a peaceful flotilla, and it was non-violent, and I suppose so we just put our hands up, and we had our hands up until we were all sitting down, and then, like I say, you're 12, 15 hours there, and they're sitting there as far as you from me, and they have a gun on everybody. One of the IOF soldiers has a gun on you, and you're just sitting there. Literally, they were on a chair, but you're just sitting there like this, for the 12 hours, and of course your head is racing, and you don't know what's going to happen, but yeah, it was tense, and then they bring you into port.
And who were the other people?
Yeah, so there was. So we had a real mix, Global South and Global North. We had men and women. We had there was Brazilians, Germans, Mexican. We had Kuwaitis, French. So there was a real mix. And honestly, it was a real honour for me to be a part of that flotilla, because I suppose it was. It was a global movement. it was a network of activists doing what government have failed to do, and what governments across the world have failed to do, which is open up a humanitarian corridor into Gaza to bring aid to the Palestinians there. So governments have failed to do that, and this was people, ordinary people from activists from across the world coming together, and so it was a real honour for me to be a part of that. And so it was, like I say, there was influencers. We had an influencer, a German woman, Anissa. She was great, and there was a few Turks. One of the Turkish lads, I was asked, and I suppose everybody is on a different journey. Well, they're all on the same journey, but they're at different points in the journey. Some people were just recently become active. Like one of the lads, he worked in Istanbul. He was a Turk, worked in Istanbul, and he had become active at the 7th of October. He'd become really active and engaged in the genocide, or opposing the genocide. And but before that, he had worked in the hair transplants. So I was saying to him that I'll go when it's all over. I said I'll be back out to him I want mates rates. So there was a real sense of solidarity on the boat. There was a real sense of just being active and wanting to see change, and so it was a real honour for me.
And have you any interaction with the Israeli troops?
Yeah, so the IOF soldiers, they didn't interact. It was just everything was at gunpoint. Everything was instructions. It was aggressive, and on the boat there was no sense of anybody just being kind or anything like that. They were just, I suppose they were hyped up. They're all young, and obviously they came from all over the world, because there was a variety of different English accents, English-speaking accents, and so they obviously came from all over the world to join the IOF. And but when we were in the port, the process, they bring you out, they put you on the ground in the distress position, so you're on your knees with your head forward, and they have you all lined up, and then they pick you out at one stage and bring you into this big warehouse, giant warehouse, actually, which I was 14 years ago. I had been on the last flotilla that I was on, and so they bring you in and they process you, but you have 2 armed police beside you, and actually, so when they were processing us, I was going through, and I still had the tracker in my sock, and when I was going through, I was hoping they'd leave me with my socks on. So I was standing there in my underpants and my socks, and the last thing I had to give over was my socks. But they made me, and so I had to put the socks, and I took them off with the tracker, but obviously so that got them really agitated. One of the police, he pulled out his gun and started in your side, telling you, shouting at you, what's that? And obviously it was the tracker, and I suppose in hindsight they might have thought it was some, something to trigger them anyway, and it looked like they were opening it. I thought they were opening it. I thought I could hear them. But Liam Kiernan in my office, he that I work with, he had it synced to his phone. And when it was, afterwards when I got back, he said it went dead in Ashdod, in the port. So he knew that it was dead, and where they'd found the tracker. But when we got to the Liam, like 2 weeks afterwards, after I was back, Liam sent me a screenshot that the tracker had been reactivated, and it was in Mossad's military intelligence office in north of Tel Aviv. So I was saying to Liam, he'd want to get rid of that phone, go off in his pocket. But he hasn't either. I suppose I'll have to get him a Christmas present or something of a new phone. So.
people including me are interested in hearing the story of your involvement in the flotilla, but you'd be the first one to say that this is nothing compared to what the Palestinian people are going through, but it's still, I think, interesting to hear the story and your experience. So around you then what happened after you through that process of being searched?
Yeah, well, that process it took hours and hours. It took most of the day, because I don't think we got into the prison till evening. It was definitely dark when we got in. But so that process, and what they do is they want you to sign a letter to say that if you sign a letter that you've entered Israel illegally, they'll deport you within 72 hours, and they want you to sign that. So obviously we didn't sign it, and they say, well, then you're going to have a court appearance in a week or two. And so that process, some people signed it and it didn't make any difference because they still kept them, but they just want you to try and sign that letter. And then so you go through that process, and when they finish that, they bring you to the jail. But what they do is they handcuff you, cable tie you, and blindfold you, and put you in a van. And of course, your head is spinning then, because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know where you're going. I presume it was a prison van. You just don't know where it is you're going, and your head is thinking the worst of everything. And so that trip then is a couple of hours. I think it was a couple of hours. I can hardly remember because it was fairly intense, but it felt like a couple of hours. And then you're brought, and then you get the jail, and you're almost relieved to get to the jail, because that's a pretty intense, scary kind of experience. So you're brought into the jail, and you're put in this big cage, and you're kind of, it's nearly, you're happy because you see loads of people. The cage wasn't that big, but there was about 70 or 80 people standing up in it, and it was literally a cage, like a bird cage, and there was a toilet without water and without toilet paper. So, you know, but I had my Imodium, so I knew it wasn't my first rodeo. So, some people had to use it, but we were there, and then eventually they pick you out and they put you in your cell, and so your cell then is it's quite a big cell. So there was about there was 4 bunk beds, so 8 people and they put about 10 or 12 of us. Now the only time you got out of the cell was when they were changing you. So I was moved to 3 different cells. We were all moved to 3 different cells at some stage, and they used to wake you up every hour and a half just to disorientate you, so you don't know, you know, what's happening, and you'd be wrecked, and a lot of us didn't eat the food. We refused to eat the food. Some people had to eat the food, but for health reasons, and so we refused to eat the food. So you were very lethargic, and then with the lack of sleep, it made it difficult. So one night they brought us out, and brought me out and a few more out to a so-called judge, and she said, "Will you sign this form?" And I said no, and she said, "Well, you're going to be here until the court hears you, and the Department of Justice decide to deport you." So you're not sure. Like, the prison is a real high security prison. We didn't know what the name was at that stage, but you knew that it was like a very modern high security prison, and it was tough going to. Actually, yeah, and so the 3 times the visit to the judge and visiting the consular, and I have to say the consular people were excellent. They were really excellent, and they do an excellent job in Greece as well, in Athens when we were deported. They were really good there as well. But we were in, the consulate came in, but I asked them, I said, what time is it? Because you don't know what time it is or what day it was. And he said, I don't know. He said, they took my watch and my phone off me. So, like, that's extraordinary, I think, that embassy staff, you know, could have their phone and their watch taken off them. Like, that just, for me, and Ireland and the Irish government and governments across the world do nothing to stand up to Israel. It's unbelievable. Like, it just, and even though that's only a small thing, I'm thinking that's like the state. They're abusing the state, and the Irish state does nothing.
Was there much of Ireland's cost any impediment of Ireland's support?
Yeah, I think Ireland is generally recognised as having a good, you know, really strong support of Palestine and Gaza and ending the genocide. The Irish are known for, you know, that solidarity. And I always feel I have to explain to them, it's the Irish people, it's not the Irish government. And there's a difference, because the Irish people are really, really strong in their support. But unfortunately, the Irish government aren't that. But when people say, oh, the Irish government are great, like, I find that hard to, I do tend to have to correct them and say, it's actually the people are great. The government are not so great. And they're not holding the people to account. I think recognising Palestine was an important, but it was more important for the activists and people involved, because I don't think it actually makes any difference to Palestine. It didn't bring the end of the genocide any closer, because Israel, it wasn't affecting Israel other than they didn't want to see Palestinians get that. But again, the Irish government, they don't hold anyone to account, Israel to account. They will fund Palestinian projects. For years they were funding different aid, UNRWA and building schools, and it would get blown up and they just give them more money to build it up again. But there was never Israel. So I think, yes, it was good for Palestine and Palestinians, and that is welcome. However, it doesn't hold Israel to account, and that is like, there's no sanctions, there's no consequences for Israel for doing what they've done. Yes, the Irish government did do something positive, and they've done well in terms of medical evacuations and the students coming over, but that still doesn't tackle the root of it, which is tackling and holding Israel to account. And like I say, we all want to see peace, and peace is obviously the goal. However, without justice, without self-determination, without, you know, access to education, access to freedom of movement, there will never be a lasting peace. And that is the problem, because the structures and the processes aren't in place to allow justice for Palestinians. And so the genocide will continue, the starvation will continue, and the Irish government will make gestures that are nice to Palestinians, but won't address the underlying reasons for the genocide, which is Israel, which is money and power and influence. And just in relation to the RTE, that was pretty annoying as well. I found that, like, it was unbelievable. Like, they were mentioning people from other political parties who weren't even on the flotilla, and never mentioned. But if I could just as well say, and Gerry mentioned it earlier, as bad as things were for me and as dangerous as they might have been for me, I am, a white man with lots of privileges, and what happened to me bears no resemblance to what the daily life of Palestinians is, and how unbelievably bad they're treated. And when we talk about, because you hear about releasing the hostages, and yes, it's great, it's really important that all the hostages were released, but when we use the word hostages, we describe Israelis as hostages, but Palestinians as prisoners. Now, for me, if you're kidnapped, taken at gunpoint, held in some detention point, and you don't have access to any legal process, you have no charges, you have no access to barristers or solicitors, you're a hostage. And there's hundreds and hundreds of hostages being kept by Israel. So it's important that, and I do it myself, I say Palestinian prisoners need to be released, but it's Palestinian hostages need to be released. And language, I suppose, and that colonial language needs to be challenged, and we all need to do that too, I think. So unless there is, because Israel, apart from the genocide and the starvation, they have dismantled international law. America and Israel have dismantled international law. Like, even within the EU, there's a legal framework that we're supposed to work in that protects countries, smaller countries like ourselves. But that has been breached. Ursula von der Leyen has been glowing in her admiration for Israel. And people say, oh, I'm European, but the reality is people at the moment and up to very recently, the approval rate for the EU was 80%. But that is going to fracture if Ursula von der Leyen and the EU continue along the path where they can step outside the legal framework that's in place to smash activists, smash trade unions, and smash Palestinian protests, which is what's been happening across Europe, and it's very worrying, and that's because it's given the green light. So if people see the EU's support for Israel and ongoing support, increasing support for Israel, and complicity in the genocide, there's going to be a fracture between. So in terms, even if European supporters should be worried about the increasing alignment between the EU and Israel. So, but if I could just say, I think it's really important that what the flotilla showed, what Israel has is, it has a global network of well-funded organisations like AIPAC and organisation across Europe, and they are a network. And what the flotilla did, and I think it started to do, is to build a global network for advocacy for Palestine. And we have to work with Italian unions, with Spanish unions, with Slovenian unions, and we have to stay active and campaign relentlessly, because now more than ever the media attention has gone off. If you look at the news feed, Gaza and Palestine is hardly mentioned, and Gaza is more than just about Palestine. It's about humanity, and it's about fighting for humanity, whether that's in Ireland or whether it's in Palestine. It's about humanity and the reconstruction of international law to support countries and human rights and self-determination by communities across the world, including here in Ireland. So we have to stay active and involved, and I know I see Rebecca here from Irish Sport for Palestine, who they've just recently ensured that Infantino, the FIFA president and UEFA president, are going to be charged with complicity in genocide, I think. Isn't that right? Yeah, so these sort of initiatives and groups are doing amazing work, and we have to support them, because while the media, RTE and the Irish Times have moved on to something else, we still have to stay active and go through and hold people to account, just like the Irish Sport for Palestine are trying to do with in terms of in a sporting context. And but I think we can do that, and I think we are. There's a lot of activism around, and I think it's really important now more than ever.
part of this. So, just let us look back for a second. The current effort, the so-called doesn't contain anything which is about a ban on Palestinians. Doesn't contain the right of the people of Palestine to self-determination and freedom of themselves. We need to be very, very alert to that. Whatever's going on, of course, people are still being killed. The occupation continues, and these big parks continue to support that. So, but we need to have a long view of this. The only bad outcome here is that the people of Palestine have a viable state, which they decide on, which they shape themselves. So I want to thank you all so much. Here we featured are in diaspora. O'Hara and Chris, in the Wales correct. I want to repeat my thanks to the honoured Eddie Hurd. And see this new yogi ball up there? Honoured Eddie Hurd. You may be pleased to know that the BBC paid for that, so. And I just wanted to keep to give an recognition of his work, to give Chris this book put together written by Gerry Adams. It's a personal portrait of our friend Margaret. I'm sure that.
Sure, Margaret, Joe. Sure, Margaret. Thanks.
Good
Margaret. Good Margaret.